The alarm systems screamed through every corridor of the Starweaver as the ship tore through the planet's atmosphere. Smoke filled the bridge while sparks exploded from damaged control panels. Captain Vexra gripped her command chair with all four of her insectoid limbs, her compound eyes reflecting the chaos unfolding on the view screens. "Hull integrity at 30%, shouted Holm, his crystalline body flickering with stress patterns. The Shardborn pilot's usually calm voice cracked with fear as he fought the controls. "I cannot hold this course much longer." Danny Porter checked his safety harness and glanced around the bridge. The human liaison officer had seen plenty of emergencies during his 5 years with mixed-species crews, but this one looked worse than most. Through the forward viewport, where he could see thick jungle canopy rushing up to meet them at terrifying speed. "Everyone secure yourselves," Vexra commanded, her translator converting her clicking speech into standard language. "Holm, aim for that river valley. The water might cushion our landing." "Attempting now, Captain," Holm replied, his crystalline fingers dancing across the failing navigation system. The ship shuddered violently. Danny heard a horrible grinding sound from somewhere below decks. That was probably the engine core finally giving up, he thought. The Starweaver had been mapping this uncharted planet when something went wrong with the power systems. Everything happened so fast. One moment they were conducting scans, the next moment they were falling from the sky like a stone. Zin, the ship's medic, clutched her station with her webbed hands. Speed, the amphibious Quellen's skin had turned a pale blue, which Danny knew meant she was terrified. Behind her, the two Vescan engineers, Tora and Mick, had wrapped their forearms around support beams. Their twin voices chanted what sounded like prayers in their native language. Navigator Pleath had tucked his avian body into a crash position, his feathered wings folded tight against his sides. The scree was trembling, his beak opening and closing without sound. In the science station, Oral had compressed his gelatinous form into the smallest possible shape, trying to fit entirely within his protective seat. The bloomer's transparent body rippled with waves of fear. Danny took a deep breath and forced himself to stay calm. Someone needed to keep their head clear, and right now everyone else was too scared to think straight. "US impact in 15 seconds, Holm announced. The jungle canopy smashed against the viewports. Branches and leaves exploded across the screens. The ship hit the ground hard, bounced once, then crashed through trees. Metal screamed as the hull tore open. The lights went out. Emergency systems tried to activate but failed. The ship scraped across the ground for what felt like forever, before finally sliding to a stop. Danny's head rang from the impact. His harness had bruised his chest and shoulders, but he could move his fingers and toes, which meant nothing was broken. He released his harness and dropped to the tilted floor. The bridge was completely dark except for a few dying indicator lights. "Sound off," he called out. "Who's injured?" Groans and clicking sounds came from around the bridge. Danny pulled out his emergency light and switched it on. The small beam cut through the smoke and dust. Captain Vexra was still in her chair, but one of her legs bent at a wrong angle. Green fluid leaked from cracks in her exoskeleton. "I am conscious," she managed to say, "but I believe my leg is broken." Holm had fallen from his station. His crystalline body had several deep cracks running through it, and pieces of him had chipped off. "I cannot stand," he said weakly. "My structural integrity is compromised." Danny moved quickly to check each crew member. Zin had a deep gash across her shoulder where a piece of metal had cut her. Her breathing sounded wrong, bubbling and strained. The Veskans both had broken arms, 2 out of their 8 total. Pleath's right wing hung at an odd angle, clearly fractured. Manural had somehow absorbed most of his impact, but his gelatinous mass had ruptured in several places, and he was slowly leaking vital fluids. Danny was the only one who had survived mostly unharmed. A few bruises, a cut on his forehead, but nothing serious. He looked at his crew and felt his stomach drop. They were all hurt badly, and they were stranded on an unknown planet with no working systems. "Can anyone reach the medical bay?" Danny asked. "The corridor is blocked," Tora said, pain making her voice tight. "I saw it on my way to the bridge before we crashed. The whole midsection collapsed." Danny checked his portable scanner. Dead. He tried the bridge communications panel. Also dead. The ship's main power core must have failed completely. That meant no lights, no heat, no medical equipment, no food fabricators, and worst of all, no distress beacon. I will attempt to restore emergency power, Vexra said, trying to stand. She collapsed immediately, her broken leg unable to support her weight. Captain, stay down, Danny said firmly. Let me assess the situation first. Everyone stay where you are. Don't move unless you absolutely have to. He made his way carefully through the wrecked bridge to the emergency supply locker. Inside, he found basic first aid supplies, some water rations, a few survival tools, and emergency blankets. Not much, but better than nothing. Danny distributed water to everyone and used the medical supplies to temporarily bandage the worst injuries. His hands worked automatically while his mind raced through their problems. They needed rescue, but without a working beacon, no one knew where they were. They needed medical care, but all the equipment was dead or inaccessible. They needed food, but the fabricators required power. How long until rescue? Pleath asked, his voice barely a whisper. Vexra's antennae drooped. The Star Weaver was not due to report in for another 2 weeks. If we cannot activate the distress beacon, no one will even know we are missing until then. And even after that, searching this entire planet sector could take months. Silence fell over the bridge. Danny saw the fear in everyone's eyes. Or eye equivalents, he corrected himself. Different species, different anatomy, but the same expression of despair. Then we focus on surviving until rescue comes, Danny said, keeping his voice steady and confident. We have each other, and we have our training. We'll figure this out. But even as he spoke those encouraging words, Danny wondered if he was lying to them. Looking at his injured crew in the dim emergency light, surrounded by the ruins of their ship on an alien world, he honestly did not know if any of them would survive long enough to be rescued. Danny spent the first hour after the crash making sure everyone was as comfortable as possible. He found cushions from the destroyed stations and propped up injured limbs. He covered the crew with emergency blankets because the ship's temperature control was dead and the air was already getting cold. Through the cracked viewports, he could see that night was falling on this unknown planet. We need to talk about our situation, Captain Vexra said from her position on the floor. Despite her injury, she was still trying to lead. Danny respected that. Our immediate problems are injuries, shelter, heat, and food. The shelter problem is solved for now, Danny said, gesturing at the wrecked bridge around them. This compartment is mostly intact. It will protect us from weather and any animals outside. But food is a serious issue, Zin said, her breathing still labored. The fabricators are offline. We have perhaps 3 days of emergency rations in that locker. 3 days for you, maybe, Holmes said quietly. His crystalline voice sounded hollow. But those rations are designed for standard biological species. They will not sustain me at all. Danny looked at the shard-born pilot with concern. What do you mean? My species does not eat food like yours, Holmes explained. I absorb energy directly from light, specifically certain wavelengths in the blue and ultraviolet spectrum. The emergency rations are useless to me. Without proper light exposure, I will begin to deteriorate within 4 days. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Danny felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had worked with different species for years, but he had never really thought deeply about how different their needs were. I also cannot eat your standard rations, Vexra admitted. My species requires crystallized mineral salts. We extract specific compounds from them that our bodies cannot produce. Without these minerals, my organs will begin to fail in perhaps 5 days. I need protein chains found only in aquatic life forms, Zin added quietly. My people evolved in oceans. Our digestive systems are specialized. Standard rations will pass through me without providing any nutrition. I have maybe 3 days before I become too weak to function. Danny turned to the Veskans. Tora and Mick looked at each other with their large eyes before Tora spoke. We require sulfur compounds in our food. Our homeworld has high sulfur content in all the plants and animals. Without it, we develop a condition similar to what you humans call scurvy. Our connective tissues break down. We have perhaps 4 days. Seeds, Pleath whispered. My kind needs seeds with particular oils in them. Our beaks and digestive systems evolved specifically to process them. Nothing else provides proper nutrition. 4 days, maybe 5. All eyes turned to Ural. The gelatinous bloomer rippled with distress. I must have organic matter dissolved in liquid form. My species absorbs nutrients through our entire body surface. Solid food means nothing to me. I can survive perhaps 3 days on the water rations, but no longer. Danny stood very still, processing what he had just heard. The emergency rations would keep him alive for weeks, maybe even a month if he was careful. Humans could eat almost anything and extract some nutrition from it. But his entire crew would die within days because their bodies were too specialized. Each species had evolved on different worlds with different conditions, and now those differences had become death sentences. So we have between 3 and 5 days before people start dying, Danny said slowly, unless we find a way to meet everyone's specific needs. On an unknown planet with no working scanners or analysis equipment, Vexra said, the odds are not favorable. Danny walked to the damaged viewport and looked outside. The last light of day was fading. Through the broken canopy, he could see thick jungle vegetation, trees with strange purple leaves, vines covered in thorns. In the distance, he heard something that might have been running water. I heard a river when we were coming down, he said, before the crash. Did anyone else notice it? Yes, Holm confirmed. We passed over a river valley approximately half a mile from our current position. I aimed for it deliberately, hoping the water would cushion our landing. A river means a complete ecosystem, Danny said, thinking out loud. Water, plants, animals, minerals, everything that flows through a river valley. But we have no way to know if anything there is compatible with our needs, Tora argued. Without scanners, we cannot analyze the local life. We could poison ourselves trying to eat the wrong things. Or we could die for certain by doing nothing, Danny countered. He turned to face his crew. Look, I understand the risks, but we have a choice here. We can sit in this wreck and slowly starve, or we can try to survive using what this planet offers. You make it sound simple, Mick said, but none of us can even walk properly. I have 2 broken arms. The captain cannot stand. Holm is cracked and might shatter if he moves wrong. How are we supposed to explore and gather food? Danny took a deep breath. He had been avoiding this thought, but now he said it out loud. You're not, I am. Everyone stared at him. Captain Vexra's antennae stood straight up in surprise. You cannot be serious. One person, alone, trying to meet the specialized dietary needs of 6 different species? That is impossible. Maybe, Danny admitted, but I'm the only one healthy enough to try, and humans are good at figuring things out. We're adaptable. Our ancestors survived in deserts, frozen wastelands, jungles, mountains, and islands. We learned to eat thousands of different plants and animals. We figured out how to find water in places where it seemed impossible. That adaptability is built into us. But you know nothing about xenobiology, Zin protested. You're not a scientist. No, but I know my crew, Danny said firmly. I know what you need to survive. You just told me. Now I need to go out there and find it. Crystallized minerals for the captain, proper light for Holm, aquatic proteins for Zin, sulfur compounds for Tora and Mick, seeds for Pleath, dissolved organics for Ural. And that's my mission now. And what about you? Pleath asked. What will you eat? Danny smiled slightly. Humans can eat almost anything. I'll be fine. You all are my priority. This is too dangerous, Vexra said. As captain, I cannot allow you to risk yourself this way. With respect, Captain, you don't have a choice, Danny said gently. If I don't do this, we all die. If I try and fail, we die. But if I try and succeed, we all live. Those odds are better than sitting here waiting for the end. He gathered the few tools from the emergency locker. A knife, some rope, a water container, his light, and a small collection bag. Not much, but it would have to be enough. I'll head for the river now while I can still see a little, Danny said. I'll be back before full dark with whatever I can find. Get some rest. Now try to stay calm and save your energy. Danny, Vex recalled as he headed for the broken doorway. Be careful. We need you to come back. I will, he promised. Then he stepped out of the ship and into the alien jungle, leaving his injured crew behind in the darkness. The jungle was nothing like anything Danny had seen before. The trees were massive, with trunks as wide as small buildings. Their bark had a strange silver sheen that seemed to glow faintly in the dying light. Purple and orange leaves created a thick canopy overhead. Vines hung everywhere, some with flowers that gave off sweet smells, others covered in sharp thorns. Danny moved carefully through the undergrowth, listening for the sound of water. His boots sank into soft moss with each step. Strange insects buzzed past his head, their wings making musical sounds. In the distance, something large moved through the trees, but he could not see what it was. The sound of running water grew louder. Danny pushed through a final curtain of vines and found himself standing on the bank of a wide river. The water was clear enough to see the bottom in the shallows. Smooth stones covered the riverbed. Small fish-like creatures darted between the rocks, their scales reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Danny knelt by the water's edge and carefully filled his container. He would need to filter this before anyone could drink it, but at least they had a clean water source. That solved one immediate problem. He looked around carefully, his mind working through what he needed to find. Minerals for Captain Vexra. The riverbank seemed like a good place to start. Rivers carried minerals downstream from mountains and deposited them along their course. Danny walked slowly along the shore, examining the rocks and sand. After 20 minutes of searching, he found what he was looking for. A small outcropping of crystalline formations jutted from the riverbank, where the water had eroded away the soil. The crystals caught the fading light, throwing tiny rainbows across the wet stones. Danny carefully broke off several pieces and examined them. They looked similar to salt crystals with geometric shapes and translucent surfaces. He could not be sure they were exactly what Vexra needed, but they were the best option he had found. He placed the crystals carefully in his collection bag and continued searching. The river curved ahead and Danny followed it upstream. The jungle grew thicker here, with stranger plants. Some had leaves that seemed to track his movement. Others released small puffs of spores when he walked past them. Then he saw something that made him stop. A patch of bright sunlight broke through the canopy ahead, creating a natural clearing where a large tree had fallen. The light there was different from normal sunlight, filtered through the planet's unique atmosphere. It had a slightly blue tint to it. Danny remembered Holmes saying he needed blue and ultraviolet wavelengths. This might work. He marked the location in his mind. Tomorrow he could bring Holmes here, or at least create some kind of reflector to direct this light back to the ship. The sun was setting fast now. Danny knew he needed to work quickly. He turned his attention to the river itself. Zin needed protein from aquatic creatures. The fish-like animals he had seen earlier were still darting through the shallows. Danny waded into the water up to his knees. The current was gentle here. He used vines from nearby plants to quickly weave a simple trap, the way his grandfather had taught him during camping trips when he was a child. It was just a basic funnel design, narrow at one end and wide at the other. He anchored it between rocks in the shallows where the fish seemed to gather. While he waited for something to swim into his trap, Danny searched the riverbank for the other items he needed. Seeds for Pleath proved easier than expected. He found several plants with seed pods hanging over the water. The pods were hard and contained dozens of small seeds coated in what felt like natural oil. Danny collected as many as he could reach. Sulfur compounds for the Veskans were harder to locate. Danny walked further upstream, looking for any sign of volcanic activity. Where there was volcanic soil, there was usually sulfur. The smell hit him before he saw it. A sharp, distinctive odor like rotten eggs. Around the next bend in the river, Danny found a small hot spring feeding into the main waterway. The rocks around it were stained yellow and orange with mineral deposits. Steam rose from the bubbling water. Danny carefully collected mud from around the spring. It was thick with sulfur compounds. He could smell them strongly. For Ural, Danny needed organic matter dissolved in water. He found a quiet pool off the main river where dead leaves and plant material had collected. The water there was dark with decomposed vegetation. Danny collected some of this water in a separate container. It looked unpleasant, but if he filtered it properly, it might provide exactly what Ural needed to survive. Danny checked his fish trap and found 3 small creatures caught inside. They looked like a cross between fish and salamanders with fins and legs. Their scales were bright blue. He killed them quickly and humanely, then wrapped them in large leaves to carry back. The sky was almost completely dark now. Danny's emergency light was his only illumination. He gathered everything he had collected and began the journey back to the ship. The jungle was different at night. New sounds echoed through the trees. Eyes reflected his light from the shadows. Something howled in the distance, a sound that made his skin prickle. Danny walked faster, constantly checking his direction. He had marked his path with broken branches and torn vines on the way out, and now he followed these signs back. His arms were full of collected materials. The bag weighed heavily on his shoulder. But he felt a spark of hope for the first time since the crash. When he finally saw the dark shape of the wrecked ship ahead, Danny let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He climbed through the broken hull and made his way to the bridge. Everyone was still awake, though they looked worse than before. Vexra's coloring had dulled. Holmes' cracks seemed deeper. Zin was breathing in short, painful gasps. The others all showed signs of their bodies beginning to fail without proper nutrition. "You came back," Pleath said with obvious relief. "I told you I would," Danny said. He set down his collection bag and containers. I found some things. I cannot promise any of it will work perfectly, but it is a start." He showed them what he had gathered. The crystals for Vexra, who examined them with her antennae and said they smelled right. The location of the blue-tinted clearing for Holm. The aquatic creatures for Zin, who looked at them with desperate hope. The sulfur-rich mud for Tora and Mick. The oily seeds for Pleath. The organic-rich water for Ural. "Tomorrow I will go back and bring more," Danny promised. "I will also set up a proper camp by the river. The resources we need are all there. We just have to learn how to use them." "But what about you?" Zin asked. "What did you find for yourself?" Danny smiled tiredly. "I ate some fruits on the way back. They tasted strange, but not bad. Humans have tough digestive systems. We can handle most things. You do not worry about me." What he did not tell them was that he had only eaten one small fruit, and it had not tasted very good. He was already hungry again, but his crew needed the resources more than he did. They would die without specialized nutrition. He could survive on very little if necessary. That was what humans did. They adapted. They endured. They made sacrifices for their team. Danny began processing what he had collected using the basic chemistry knowledge all liaison officers learned. He crushed some crystals for Vexra to consume. He prepared the fish for Zin, removing anything that looked potentially toxic. He sorted the seeds for Pleath and mixed the sulfur mud with water for the Veskans. As his crew ate their first real nutrition in more than a day, Danny saw color return to their faces and bodies. They were far from healthy, but at least they were not actively dying anymore. "Rest now," Danny said. "Tomorrow I will do better. I will find more and learn what works best." He sat down against the wall, exhausted. His muscles ached from walking through the jungle. His hands were cut and bruised from gathering materials. But as he watched his crew sleeping more peacefully than before, Danny felt a quiet satisfaction. They would survive this. Somehow, he would make sure of it. Morning light filtered through the broken viewports, waking Danny from a restless sleep. His body ached everywhere, but there was no time to rest. He checked on each crew member before doing anything else. They all looked slightly better than yesterday, though still weak and injured. Captain Vexra's broken leg was swollen, but the emergency splint Danny had fashioned was holding. She had consumed the crystals he brought, and her exoskeleton showed a bit more shine than before. Holmes sat near a viewport where early morning light could reach him, though Danny knew it was not the right kind of light. The Shardborn's cracks had not gotten worse at least. Zin had eaten the fish creatures, and her breathing sounded less strained. The protein seemed to be helping. Tora and Mick were moving their uninjured arms more easily after consuming the sulfur mud mixture. Pleath had eaten several of the seeds and seemed more alert. Ural had absorbed some of the organic rich water and had stopped leaking from his ruptures. "How do you feel?" Danny asked them. "Better than yesterday," Vexra admitted. "But we will need consistent nutrition to truly heal. What you brought was enough to stop us from deteriorating, but not enough to restore our strength." "I understand," Danny said. That is why I am going back to the river today. I will gather more of everything and start establishing a proper routine. You should eat something first, Zin said, her large eyes concerned. You look exhausted. Danny waved off her worry. I am fine. I will eat when I get back. He gathered his tools and headed out while the morning was still cool. The path to the river was easier to follow in daylight. Danny noticed details he had missed in the dark. The purple leaves of the trees seemed to turn toward the sunlight. Small animals scurried through the undergrowth, some with fur, others with scales or feathers. At the river, Danny found his fish trap had caught 5 more of the aquatic creatures overnight. He processed them carefully, learning which parts seemed safest for Zin to eat. He wrapped them in fresh leaves and set them aside. Next, he returned to the crystal outcropping and carefully extracted more mineral formations. He noticed there were different types of crystals here. Some were clear, others had a slight green or pink tint. He collected samples of each, thinking that variety might help meet Vexra's complex nutritional needs. Danny spent the next hour improving his fishing trap design. He wove a second trap and placed it downstream. He also created a simple net from vines, which he could use to actively catch fish instead of just waiting for them to swim into traps. The hot spring area required careful work. Danny collected more sulfur-rich mud, but also found actual sulfur deposits in the rocks nearby. He carefully scraped these into a container. The smell was strong and unpleasant, but if it kept Tora and Mick alive, he would collect it every single day. For Pleath, Danny explored further along the riverbank and found 3 different plants producing seed pods. He gathered samples from all of them, hoping to give the scree some variety in his diet. One plant had particularly large seeds that split open to reveal a pale, oily interior that smelled almost pleasant. The organic matter for Oral was everywhere. Danny realized he could create better nutrition by deliberately composting plant material in clean river water. He set up a small pool in the shallows, lined with rocks, and filled it with leaves and soft plant matter. Given a day or two, this would break down into exactly what Oral needed. Danny worked through the morning without stopping. He drank from the river when he was thirsty. His stomach growled with hunger, but he ignored it. There would be time to eat later. Around midday, Danny had an idea about Holmes' light problem. He could not bring the Shardborn to the clearing every day, not with Holmes' body so fragile and cracked. But maybe he could bring the light to home. Danny searched the area until he found what he needed. Large, flat pieces of mica-like stone near the riverbank. They were naturally reflective. He carefully collected several pieces and cleaned them in the river water. If he positioned these correctly, he could reflect and focus the special blue-tinted sunlight from the clearing back toward the ship. It took hours of work to set up the reflector system. Our Danny had to climb trees to position some of the stones. He used vines to secure them at the right angles. He tested and adjusted until a beam of blue-tinted light was successfully bouncing from reflector to reflector, creating a path that led back toward where the ship had crashed. By the time he finished, the sun was past its peak. Danny gathered everything he had collected and made the journey back to the ship. His arms were full, and his shoulders ached from carrying the weight. When he reached the bridge, his crew was waiting anxiously. They had clearly been worried about how long he had been gone. I brought more of everything, Danny announced, setting down his loads, and I think I solved Holmes' light problem. He explained the reflector system while distributing the food and minerals he had gathered. Vexra examined the different colored crystals with great interest. Zin accepted the fish gratefully. The Veskans took both the mud and the pure sulfur samples. Pleath sorted through the various seeds. Oral seemed excited about the composting pool idea. The reflectors should bring blue spectrum light right to the ship, Danny explained to Holm. If we position you correctly near the viewport, you should get the wavelengths you need without having to move. You built an entire system of mirrors just for me? Holm asked, his crystalline voice filled with emotion. Of course, Danny said simply. You need it to survive. Over the next several days, Danny fell into a routine. He woke early and checked on everyone. Then he spent hours at the river, fishing, gathering minerals and plants, maintaining the composting pool, and adjusting the reflector system as the sun's angle changed. He returned each evening with supplies. His crew grew stronger gradually. Vexra's leg began healing properly with the right mineral nutrition. Holmes' cracks started to seal as he absorbed sufficient light energy. Zin's wounds closed, and her breathing returned to normal. Tora and Mick regained strength in their broken arms. Pleath's wings stopped hurting. Ural's body became whole again. But Danny grew thinner. He ate only small amounts of the fruits and roots he found, things that would not take away from what his crew needed. He told himself he was fine, that humans could survive on very little for a long time. One evening, after Danny had distributed everyone's food and was preparing to settle down for the night, Pleath spoke up. "Danny, what did you eat today?" "I had some fruit earlier," Danny said vaguely. "Show us," Vexra said, her tone stern. Danny reluctantly pulled out his small food pouch. Inside were 3 small wrinkled fruits and some tough roots. It was barely enough for one meal, let alone a full day's nutrition for someone who had been working as hard as Danny had. "This is all you have been eating?" Zin asked, her voice rising with concern. "Humans do not need much," Danny said. "I am adapted for efficiency." "Nonsense," Vexra said firmly. "You have been starving yourself to feed us." "I have been prioritizing," Danny corrected. "You all need specific nutrition or you die. I can eat almost anything and survive. The math is simple." "But for how long?" Tora asked. "Look at yourself, Danny. You have lost weight. Your face is drawn. You move slower than you did 3 days ago." Danny looked down at himself. His uniform hung looser than before. His hands looked bonier. He had been so focused on keeping everyone else alive that he had not paid attention to his own deteriorating condition. "I will find more food tomorrow," he said. "Do not worry about me." "But we do worry," Holmes said quietly. "You saved all of us, Danny. You run yourself to exhaustion every single day to meet our needs. You built me a light system. You created special pools for Ural. You climb trees and wade through rivers and process food and collect minerals without ever stopping." "That is what humans do," Danny said, feeling uncomfortable with the attention. "We take care of our team. We adapt to situations. We solve problems. Or any human would do the same thing." "I do not believe that," Vexra said. "I have worked with many humans over my career. They are clever and adaptable, yes. But what you are doing goes beyond adaptation. You are sacrificing yourself for us." "Not sacrificing," Danny protested, "just prioritizing properly." "Why?" Mick asked. "Why do you care so much about keeping us alive?" Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, trying to find the right words. "Because you are my crew. Because when I joined the Starweaver, you all accepted me. You taught me about your cultures. You shared your stories. You treated me like family, not just like the human liaison officer." He looked at each of them in turn. "Vexra, you trusted me with important decisions even though I was younger and less experienced. Holm, you taught me to appreciate beauty in crystalline mathematics. Zin, you listened when I was homesick and helped me feel less alone. Tora and Mick, you made me laugh with your terrible jokes in 2 languages. Pleath, you sang me songs from your homeworld. Ural, you showed me that intelligence comes in many forms." Danny's voice grew stronger. "You are not just my crew. You are my friends. You are the people I share my life with out here among the stars. How could I not do everything in my power to keep you alive? What kind of person would I be if I let you die when I could prevent it?" Silence filled the bridge. Then Zin began to cry, tears running down her amphibious face. Pleath made a soft, trilling sound that Danny recognized as deep emotion. Even Vexra's antennae drooped in a gesture of profound feeling. "Humans," Vexra said softly, "are remarkable creatures." 3 weeks passed in the jungle. Danny maintained his daily routine, though his crew had convinced him to eat more. They insisted he take a fair share of the fruits and edible plants he found. Slowly, his strength began to return. The camp by the river had become almost comfortable. Danny had built proper shelters near the water, using salvaged materials from the ship and natural resources. He moved each crew member down to the river one at a time, creating safe spaces where they could rest while healing. Vexra's shelter had direct access to the mineral deposits. Holmes' position caught the reflected blue light perfectly for most of the day. Zin had a pool of clean river water where she could soak her healing wounds. The Veskans had their sulfur processing area. Pleath had easy access to the seed-bearing plants. Ural's composting pools were thriving with rich organic material. Everyone was healing. Vexra could walk again, though with a slight limp. Holmes' cracks had sealed completely, and his crystalline body rang with clear tones when he moved. Zin's shoulder wound had closed without infection. Tora and Mick had regained full use of their arms. Pleath's wing had healed enough for short flights. Ural had regenerated his lost mass. They worked together now. Vexra helped Danny identify which minerals were richest in the compounds she needed. Holm calculated the best angles for the light reflectors as the season slowly shifted. Zin taught Danny which parts of the aquatic creatures were most nutritious. The Veskans processed sulfur compounds more efficiently. Pleath scouted from above for new seed plants. Ural filtered water and created better composting systems. It was early morning when they heard it. A distant sound that did not belong to the jungle. Danny froze, listening carefully. There it was again. The unmistakable hum of engines. A ship, Holmes said, his voice filled with hope. Everyone rushed to the clearing. High above the canopy, a vessel descended through the clouds. It was a Galactic Council rescue ship, its hull marked with emergency response symbols. Danny activated the emergency flare from the survival kit he had saved for this moment. Bright red light shot into the sky. The rescue ship altered course immediately, heading straight for their position. Within an hour, the rescue team landed near the river. 6 crew members in environmental suits emerged, carrying medical equipment and supplies. Their leader, a tall Quellan female, approached with her scanner active. "We detected the Star Weaver's emergency beacon signature," she said. "We expected to find wreckage and bodies. How are you all alive?" Captain Vexra stepped forward, her limp barely noticeable. "We survived because of him." She gestured to Danny. "Our human liaison officer kept us all alive." The rescue team leader looked at Danny with surprise. One person sustained 7 survivors on an uncharted planet for 3 weeks? "He did more than sustain us," Holmes said, his crystalline body reflecting sunlight. "He learned our individual nutritional requirements and met each one. He built shelter. He created systems to provide specialized resources. He worked himself to exhaustion every single day." The rescue medics began scanning the crew. One medic, a young Vescan male, looked at Danny with concern. "You are malnourished and dehydrated. Your body is operating on minimal reserves." "I am fine," Danny said. "Check the others first." "We are checking everyone," the medic said firmly, "but you need immediate treatment." As the medical team worked, the rescue leader examined the camp Danny had built. She studied the fish traps, the mineral collection area, the light reflector system, the composting pools, the sulfur processing station, and the seed gathering spots. "This is remarkable," she said. "You created specialized resource gathering for 6 different species with completely different biological needs, or using only basic tools and natural materials." "I just used what was available," Danny said, feeling embarrassed by the attention. "No," Zin said firmly. "You did far more than that. You gave us hope when we had none. You worked when you were exhausted. You went hungry so we could eat properly. You never complained. You never gave up on us." The rescue team transported everyone to their ship. The medical bay was clean and bright, filled with advanced equipment. Danny watched as his crew received proper treatment for their injuries. The doctor said everyone would make full recoveries. A medic approached Danny with a nutrient drink and a meal. "You need to consume this immediately. Your blood work shows severe caloric deficit. You have been operating on starvation rations while performing intense physical labor." Danny drank the nutrient solution. It tasted wonderful after weeks of basic fruits and roots. The medic stayed with him, monitoring his vitals as his body began absorbing proper nutrition again. Captain Vexra came to see Danny in the medical bay. She moved carefully, her legs still healing, but her eyes were bright and alert. "I have filed my official report with the rescue team," she said. "I made sure they understand exactly what happened. What you did for us." "You did not need to make it special," Danny said. "I just helped my crew survive." "That is exactly the point," Vexra said. "You just helped. as if it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. You never hesitated. You never calculated whether we were worth the effort. You simply saw that we needed help and you provided it. She touched his hand gently with her antenna. Danny Porter, you represent everything good about humanity. Your species is not just adaptable in biology. You are adaptable in spirit. You see a problem and you solve it. You see suffering and you ease it. You see people in need and you help them, even at cost to yourself. Over the next few days, as the rescue ship traveled toward the nearest station, word of what happened spread through the crew. Everyone wanted to meet the human who had kept 7 aliens alive on an unknown planet. Danny found himself telling the story over and over. Each time he tried to downplay his role. Each time, his crew corrected him and added details he had forgotten or not considered important. Pleath described how Danny had climbed dangerous trees to collect the best seeds. Tora told about Danny wading into deep water to catch better fish, despite not being a strong swimmer. Mick explained how Danny had burned his hands on the hot sulfur deposits but kept working anyway. When they finally reached the station, news crews were waiting. The story had traveled ahead of them. The Galactic Council wanted interviews. Scientists wanted to study Danny's improvised systems. Everyone wanted to know how one human had accomplished what seemed impossible. At the official debriefing, Captain Vexra stood before the council representatives and made her statement. I have served in the Galactic Fleet for 20 years, she said. I have worked with dozens of species, but I have never witnessed anything like what Danny Porter did. He did not just keep us alive, he nourished us. He gave us hope. He showed us what it truly means to be part of a crew. She paused, looking directly at the council members. Humans are often valued in our fleet for their adaptability and problem-solving skills. But we have been thinking about this wrong. Human adaptability is not just biological. It is moral. They adapt their priorities to put others first. They adapt their comfort to ensure others survive. They adapt their entire lives to serve their crew. Vexra's voice grew stronger. Danny Porter went hungry so we could eat. He worked until exhaustion so we could rest. He risked himself in an alien jungle so we could live. And when we tried to thank him, he acted confused, as if any person would do the same. But they would not. What Danny did was extraordinary, and it came from something deep in human nature. The council chambers were completely silent. Everyone was listening. I recommend, Vexra continued, that this incident be studied not as a survival case, but as an example of what humans bring to our galactic community. They do not just bring clever hands and quick minds. They bring hearts that choose compassion over self-preservation. They bring spirits that measure success by their crew's survival, not their own comfort. She looked at Danny, who sat quietly in the back of the chamber. That human saved 7 lives. But more than that, he showed us what we can become when we truly care for each other. He showed us that survival is not just about staying alive, but about making sure everyone stays alive together. The council gave Danny a commendation for extraordinary service. His crew gave him something better. They gave him a promise that they would always be his family, no matter where their assignments took them. On the day they all returned to active duty, now on different ships across the fleet, Zin pulled Danny aside. You once said any human would have done what you did, she said. But even if that is true, you were the human who was there. You were the one who made the choice to help us. You were the one who nourished us by that river when all seemed gone. We will never forget that. Danny smiled. I will never forget it either. You all showed me what it means to have a crew worth fighting for. As he boarded his new assignment, Danny thought about those 3 weeks in the jungle. The exhaustion, the hunger, the constant work, but also the satisfaction of seeing his crew heal, or the joy of solving each problem, the deep sense of purpose that came from helping others survive. That, Danny realized, was what it meant to be human. Not just the ability to adapt and survive, but the choice to use that ability for others. Not just the strength to endure hardship, but the heart to endure it so that others would not have to. And if anyone ever needed him again, Danny knew he would make the same choice. Because that was what humans did. They helped. They adapted. They nourished their crew even when all seemed gone. Especially when all seemed gone.